Welcome to another episode of PushTalk. My name is Ali Tabib Najjar. I am the video producer for Black Push, and with me today is Brianna Kelly. She's a filmmaker. She has been working with us for some time now, and she has agreed to answer some questions I have about black culture and what have you.
Yes.
Well, one prompt I have for you is simply this. So I am an Iranian American, and I've lived my time in America largely in Montana. I lived there for 20 years and had minimal interactions with black folks. And I'm new to Atlanta and the Georgia area. What basic things would you, as a friend and coworker, want me to know about black culture?
Yeah, well, first off, I did want to know, I know I was asking you earlier,
Yeah.
a little more about your background, where you were born and raised. I know you said, I know where you moved from, but just a little tiny more information.
I am from Ahvaz, Iran,
Okay.
which is in southwest Iran. It only exists because there's oil around it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hot, flat, ugly city. What else did you want to know?
So you said you were born and raised. When did you come to America?
Oh, I was turning 17 when I came to the States.
Okay, so you were 17.
I was
Okay,
pretty
okay.
young.
Yes.
Right, and stayed in Montana from 98 to about 2018, actually. I think I spent the Christmas of 2018 in North Carolina, and then a couple of years later I moved
Yeah.
to
Yeah, it's just good to know that information because whether it's you or someone from like Cape Town, immigrant stories are always different, and there's always some sort of disconnect when it comes to like American history or some sort of American culture. But to go back to your question, what I would want you to know, I mean, there's so much, but to start off with the foundation, almost starting with slavery in particular. And when we talk about slavery, slavery was known everywhere, all through the world. But what was different about America slavery, or United States, was that it was like shadow slavery. And it was more so a mental slavery or type of mentality. So that's like go ahead.
What do you mean by that? What is that?
It's basically like owning and selling property. And even though that was somewhat the case everywhere else, it was some sort of system where it was like even though that they were property, there was a little bit more freedom and leeway. Like even if when we see slavery in like Haiti and things like that, it was just a different type of slavery. And ours is more so like mental enslavement, and which is the reason why we still deal with the same issues today, is because it was more like mental. So that's a big thing that I learned, just like the difference of that. And because a lot of times people want to forget certain things or be like, oh, that was so long ago. But the problem is that those effects still are shown today.
How would you say they manifest today?
I think they manifest today because even though we're not enslaved, we still have systematic oppressions, and we still have certain laws and legislations that was set in place to hold us back. If we think about like redlining, which is another thing, like not just.
What is redlining?
Okay, so redlining is basically segregation for housing for black people to almost keep them confined in one area.
Yeah, okay.
So if we think about like the hood, like people always want to talk about the ghetto and talk about crime and gun violence and all of that. We can't start with there. We almost have to start with redlining, because it's like we were all cooped in one area and it was poor and disenfranchised. So And that's the same in America. That's the same anywhere. If you go to an area that's predominantly poor, people are going to fight for what they're going to have a savage mentality, and that's not just a black thing. That's an everyday thing.
It's a poverty thing.
It's a poverty thing. It's a classic thing. You know what I'm saying? So redlining is another thing that we don't really talk about, because redlining is still kind of shown today. I mean, if you clearly see, you go to the suburbs, you see the certain type of people, then you go to like Atlanta, the city, certain parts, and you see a certain type of people. The reason why was because of like redlining.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's like one thing. I would start as well as not just looking at the just normal civil rights leaders. Like, obviously we have Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and I went to a black college, and that's kind of what really sparked my interest and kind of made me, because I was around so many people that were like me, but that looked like me, but they were educated and they weren't the same depiction that we saw like on media.
Yeah.
So that was so empowering for me. So that kind of made me want to be like, man, I really want to know more about like my history, not just slavery, because obviously we're more than, we weren't just enslaved. So I started just getting interested in different leaders like Stokely Carmichael, Khalid Muhammad, which are all leaders that we don't really talk about or even know. Like, I barely knew who Marcus Garvey was, and that was crazy.
Yeah.
But I am from California, so it was like a different type of learning.
Right.
I'm
nodding my head, but
yeah.
it doesn't mean I know who you're talking
exactly,
about.
which is fine. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? Because like I barely knew. You know what I'm saying?
right.
So for you, it's like, it's great that you have that bug and that spark. That's what starts it off. It's like, I want to open my mind to learn.
Right.
So I am going to ask these questions, and I am going to be willing to learn, because a lot of times we don't even know our history. So but yeah, I mean, I can go on a tangent. But
Yeah. You talked about a slave mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there are psychological hangovers from slavery that we still
Yeah.
deal with?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely, I mean, I read this article like on epigenetics, where it's like basically it passes down from 6 generations.
Wow.
So it's like, if that's the case, we're still dealing with what our ancestors dealt with, you know what I'm saying? And it's the same for black people, and it's the same for white people. And that's why I always say, like, white people are inherently racist, and that sounds like tough, but it's not really a bad thing. It's just,
it's an acknowledgement of how things.
It's an
just
acknowledgement, exactly, because it's like just knowing that, like, my ancestor. The reason why I may automatically have this thought or this judgment is because of my ancestors and what they thought and what they went through, and because of their ancestors and so on and so on. So it's important to do that work daily, to figure out, okay, how can I combat that? Yeah, and it's the same thing about with black people. It's like we inherently have slave mentality, which is like we need to ask for help. We can't do anything without help. We can't do anything, which is the same, with the slave. They couldn't do anything. Like, slavery was different for us because we were put against each other. I'm trying to think of the article that I read, but basically it was a letter that was written. And it was from a Haitian slave owner, and he wrote, and basically the American slaves, he couldn't get them together. The master couldn't get them together. So he said, if you compare the slaves, then basically they'll start fighting against each other. So it was like that's why you have colorism, like light skin versus dark skin, even though we're all black. It doesn't even matter. You know what I'm saying? So what was different with us is we kept comparing. It doesn't matter if I was taller or shorter than you. It was just comparing something that you had that was different from me. Like, you have glasses, I don't. So you're better because you have glasses. It was basically what they kept putting in for the slaves. And it wasn't just that. It was also embarrassing their partners, like the men and the women. Like, literally tying up the male, and embarrassing him in front of his wife, so she can be like, oh, he can't even protect me. Like, what is the point of me being married? You know what I'm saying? So it's all of those different variables, so we can figure out, like, why are we still dealing with this, and how can we fix this for our future generation?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Something I feel like I definitely brought to the South and to black culture was this sort of inherent almost a fear, I should just call it a fear, of doing something wrong or insulting them or what have you. First off, is that I guess, way of being, is that somehow inherently offensive? And I say that to sort of contrast it with like my own experience, where like after a while it just gets, the curiosity of people gets a little tiring and boring. Like, just treat me like a normal person, will you? Like, I'm from Iran, sure, but like,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to play the tape of all the frequently asked question answers for you.
Yeah.
And it's just
I'm
easier
sure it's
when,
annoying
yeah.
for you.
I mean, it's not insulting. It's more just a sort of annoyance at
Yeah.
people who try too hard to be correct or politically
Relatable,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah, or compassionate or what have you. Is
Yeah.
there an equivalent, I guess, that you feel?
Yeah, as far as like being politically correct and all of that.
And like being, or me say being afraid of insulting or doing something wrong. Is that like, I guess there's several questions here. One is like,
Yeah,
is that,
I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
is there like is there a sense of like walking on eggshells? No, like, is there a minefield?
Yeah, no, I
for
know
someone who
exactly
doesn't?
what you mean,
Yeah.
and I do see that when I'm working with like a white person or something like that. It's almost like they're watching their words and making sure that they don't say the wrong thing.
Right.
I mean, which is, it's a balance. Like I feel like as far as being politically correct, it's more so respecting, what people want to be called and things like that. I do think that that's important, but at the same time, I feel like you said, just being a human and kind of like asking those questions, because sometimes people are too afraid to ask questions because they think they're going to offend someone. Yeah. Like, think about your questions. Like, I mean, there's some people, which I feel like they're purposely ignorant. Mm-hmm. Like, they'll ask questions and you're like, that's just wild. But I do think it's people that are sincere in their questioning. And I wouldn't say it gets on my nerves. Like, I wouldn't say it gets on my nerves. I like educating people. That's I think is one of my God-given gifts, and something that I'm passionate about. So I do like to educate people because I like to be educated, and I ask people the same questions. And sometimes, like, I have other friends, like I have Indian friends, Asian, all types of friends, and I'll ask them the questions. And even if I feel like it's dumb, because like our world isn't just America, like and the crazy thing is, once we start researching like other countries and continents, we realize like we all have like the same agenda, and we can learn from like revolutionaries. Like we're trying so hard as a people to be on one accord, and it's hard for us because we're split up all the time. We've been divided since since the beginning, and it's been purposeful. But if we kind of look at even like certain things that like Asian Americans are doing or have done in the past, or just certain like wars and things like that, we can learn from it as far as like being united. So I feel like it's important to ask those questions.
Very nice. Thank you. So in recent few years, it seems like there has been a shift. Now I'm not in a position to know like how profound or real this change has been, but there does seem to be greater attention paid to the injustices that Black people have had to endure daily. How has that actually affected life? Has there been a profound shift? And if so, like, what does that look like on a daily basis to you?
Yeah, I have noticed, like, I mean, on a smaller scale, like, people are more kind. I remember I was with my dad one time, and this waiter had messed up our order, and he was like, okay, it's all on us. And he was like, it was like right after like the Trayvon Martin and everything, and he was like, oh, it was because of Trayvon Martin and all that, they trying to be nice. But he was just joking. My dad is silly. But I do feel like some people I do think that they're trying to be more compassionate. And on one scale, people are saying like it's not genuine. But at the same time, I feel like you fake it till you make it. So even if people are pretending like they care about this cause, I think that they're going to pretend so much that they're going to be like, wait, I actually do want to, you know what I'm saying? Because when we saw George Floyd. Like when we seen that whole thing, like it was the most emotional time for me. Like when we saw everybody in unison, and even if it was fake, like when to see that was so empowering. It was so sad, but it was empowering to finally see like even my mom at her job. Now they're having meetings talking about how they can be more conscious, like as far as like people and their beliefs and who they are, and I thought that was important because you didn't see that like back in the day. I know my grandpa, like he lost his job because he was like the most educated man there, and he was a black man. It's like so you didn't. So there's clearly a change. And I personally, I'm optimistic, so I see the good in it. And even though I wish that we were way more ahead than we are now, it is very sad that we are going through literally the same issues. And even when I listen to like Malcolm X's speeches, I get sad because I'm like, we're going through the same thing, like nothing has changed. But to me, I look at on the brighter side because he laid down the blueprint. And it's just up to us to execute it. So I'm happy for the change. I think that now we're seeing more organizations that are trying to assist. We're just seeing more people that are conscious about their actions. We're seeing more people speak up about it and not be afraid to get assassinated. You know what I'm saying? We're seeing a change, and it's slowly but surely, and I have no doubt that like the future is brighter for us.
Nice. Yeah. What do you make of the attitude that like I've heard this in conversation a lot, that like hey, this was my my great grandparents, like I had no part in slavery, why should I have to care, or why this or why that, because why do I bear any responsibility? How does that grab you, so to speak?
Well, I feel like if you don't do anything, you're part of the problem. Like staying stagnant is being part of the problem. To me, I feel like white people in particular could assist, not by being like the white savior, but using their privilege for power. Because at the end of the day, even if you didn't ask for it, you are privileged in some way. If you're white, you know what I'm saying? You may be less privileged if you're poor, but you still have some sort of privilege. So I would just, a person told me that, I would just challenge them to say, you don't have to feel guilty. We don't need your guilt, but we do need your privilege for power. So and that can be like being in the workplace, and like a black person and a woman is afraid to say something because she's afraid she's gonna get fired. You know what I'm saying? You could stand up and be like, okay, I know that I'm more so privileged, so I'm gonna speak up for that. Or even donating to causes or something like that. So to me, it's like it's not about that. It's about doing something, because there's so much work that needs to be done. So,
Speaking of donations, if you go to blackpush.org, you can donate to Black Push.
Donate to us.
I wonder if do we have some time there to open up another quick topic? Okay. So this topic was kind of handed to me. I personally was like, I feel like I know enough around this, but the N-word. Someone asked the question of like, why is it okay that in black music you hear it all the time, but like someone like me or a white person shouldn't sing along with the same lyrics out loud or what have you. So why is it okay for a black person to say it, but not for a different race?
Right. Well, I mean, I personally feel if you're not black, you shouldn't say it because you didn't go through slavery or your ancestors didn't go through anything. And that's like the simplest way for me to explain it to people. Because I'm like, because we know the origin from the word. And to me, it's like that even though like black people, we took that word, we took the struggle, the pain, the years of oppression, and we made it into ours, and we made it to something that we communicate with each other. Like some people say, get rid of it. It's never gonna be gone. It's in music. It's in our culture. So it's like it's our right. You know what I'm saying? And
I do.
At the end of the day, if your ancestors, or if you're not even in the African diaspora, you shouldn't say it just out of respect. And just like how I shouldn't say certain words, you know what I'm saying, for a certain demographic, because I did not go through that at all, and I wouldn't dare to be disrespectful and say something like that, you know.
Yeah, does the same reasoning hold for, say, because there are, of course, different senses that the N word is used.
Like music and...
Yeah, no, like, I mean, of course it's used derogatorily, which is not okay, of course. But then in black culture, you notice that it's often used as a term of endearment even.
Yeah.
Like, this guy is my N-word or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Still, the other races aren't entitled to say that to a black person or to each other. Is that...
Yeah, I mean, if honestly, I don't, like, I stress myself out too much trying to, like, police it. So, I mean, I know people that, like, are cool with their friends doing that. Yeah. And I'm like, that's you, but don't say it to me. Like, I had an ex that, like, he was like, yeah, my white dude, he cool. He's like, he said the N-word, though. And I was like, oh, not around me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. He's like, no, but he cool. We raised together. And I'm like, that's cool. But, like, if he was really just, like, a cool person, he would just, it's just a word. It's just so many words in the dictionary. You don't have to say that. Now, I mean, if it's a song, I mean, I'm not even going to police it like that. It's just like, don't say that around me. And that's all that I have to say about that. Now, some people, they're okay with that. Yeah. And that's them. I don't agree with it, but I can't tell them what to do. Just for me, I wouldn't allow it.
Yeah. One of the first black men I got to have sort of a conversation about this with was actually a philosophy professor who was visiting my other friend, who was a philosophy professor in Montana. And we were out at a bar, and he just kind of like said it to incite conversation. It was like, yada yada. And
he was a white dude?
He was black.
Oh, black dude.
And he said, like, I floss my teeth with the word, and like my buddy, a mutual friend, he said, growing up, I called him that, and even though he was white. Now, so you think you personally would not do that, but you think you're not gonna, go out of your way to correct somebody who does that? Is that?
Now, if I were to see it like in front of me, I would say, okay, like for example, like I went to my uncle's wedding, and there was this white dude that was, hip, right? And he was like, and I just didn't like him. I was just like, what? And then and that was his friend, and he was like, yeah, what's up, my dude, and he said it, and I was there, and I was just like, I was like, y'all can say that, don't say that in front of me. Like, it's just triggering for me, because to me, it's like, number one, stop trying to act like what you aren't. Like, I understand you can be immersed in the culture, because you can't say, like, there could be a white person in the hood, you know what I'm saying? Right. But it's like, at the end of the day, usually white people with intellect, they'll just know, like, okay, I don't have to be hip, I don't have to be cool and say that. Like, I could be cool and not say that. So I did check him, and I did say something. I was just like, don't say that in front of me. And he was like, oh, this my dude, man. This my dude, blah, blah. Like, my cousin, he was like, oh, he's cool. Like, he could say that. He get a pass. And I was like, nah, because when you start having passes and stuff, because can I say that on here, or like, because the A turns into ER real quick, and that's why I don't accept it, because the A turns into ER. This girl, like, okay, I worked some crazy jobs. When I first came to Georgia, I was like, wow, these people are very racist out here. And this girl that I worked with, I'll say this real quick. She's with a black man, and she was like crying in the bathroom, like, and I was like, you good? Like, she's like, oh, he put his hands on me, whatever. I was like, what happened? She's like, I called him a herb. And I was like, why did you call him? She's like, I was just mad, and I'm sorry. So somebody that's considered hip, and people probably be like, she got a pass. when she got angry, it changed to the A to the ER.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. If you give people passes, they're quickly going to be like, oh, I'm angry, so I'm going to disrespect you. I'm not going to call you my friend. I'm going to call you my slave. So that's why I don't accept that.
I do find something disturbing about that story where there was, you said he put his hands on her?
Yeah.
Like, which is the greater crime here? Like, verbal abuse versus actual physical abuse?
Well, yeah, I mean, he wasn't even there, you know what I'm saying?
Okay,
So,
yeah.
obviously, that's why I wasn't like, I wasn't like, girl, like, what's wrong with you? I was just like, oh, I was like, I mean, you should have never said that. I hope you're good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't like going crazy because
Yeah.
obviously that's not okay. But then at the same time, he not there to defend himself. So he may not even have done that. Who knows? You know what I'm saying?
So while there does seem to be something inviting almost and like charming and fun about the playful use of the word,
it can change real quick.
It can change real quick.
And that's why I don't accept it.
And because of the charge that it has as just as a word in the greater context, it's not only best not to use it, just don't use it.
Yeah, it just makes it easier if it's like I'm just not gonna use it. That just makes life easier.
Okay. All right. Well,
is that well? Before we go, I did want to recommend a few things. I wrote down a few things. So, if you really want to get immersed in Black culture, this is what made me just fall heavily in it. Like I said, looking up leaders like Stokely Carmichael, Marcus Garvey, Khalid Muhammad. I love Khalid Muhammad. He's amazing. Angela Davis. James Baldwin, who was he literally observed the whole civil rights movement. He's amazing to read because you get to like dissect what was going on, and he talks from different points of views. So he's one of my favorite authors.
Yeah. I'm trying to write these down like I can't get.
I know. I'm gonna send them to you.
But would you repeat them just because I couldn't really?
Oh, you're good. Stokely Carmichael, Marcus Garvey. Stokely Carmichael is amazing. He was a part of the nonviolent movement. Marcus Garvey is from Jamaica, and I love his philosophies because he takes like Aristotle and like different people and he like implements it with like what Black people need to do, and I thought that was super interesting. Angela Davis, we all know Angela Davis. She was amazing. James Baldwin, like I said, he's a literary king. Books to read, I would say New Jim Crow Laws. So that just shows how like the criminal justice system is almost the same as slavery. There's more people in jail than there were slaves, so that was crazy. The documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay, which is basically like a documentary based off the new Jim Crow laws. And that was one of the best documentaries. It's just crazy. Well, that's a film, but books. The Native Son by Richard Wright. That's really good because it shows how how systematic oppression can like carve out like a savage, because they talk about Black men or like whatever type of way, and it shows why they are like that. The ISIS Papers by Dr. Frances Wesley is like she's an incredible thinker, and she talks about like how white people basically their fear is they want to be superior and the reasons why and just all of that. It's really good. Almost done. Narration of Frederick Douglass is great because it talks about how he escaped and how he ended up being a free or not a slave anymore, not enslaved anymore, and how it was very clever. Like he dressed up as a sailor and left from like Baltimore to Philly. Like I thought that was crazy. And I didn't even know like his dad was his master. I didn't know he was half white. I didn't know that at all. Well, it's alleged. There's no 100% confirmation, but I didn't know that. W.E.B. Du Bois, Souls of Black Folks. That's pretty good. And that's really all.
With recommendations, I always like to ask, where would you suggest I start? Because there's several things.
I know there's so many. Shoot. Okay, well, where I started, and I forgot to even mention this. The first book that made me get into it was The Invisible Man, by Ralph Ellison.
Okay. The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison.
And for some reason, that sparked something because it's a fiction book, but it is about, so it's fiction, so it's like you can read it and see yourself in the character.
Yeah.
But it was real because it was basically how this man who he was not named, and he was basically invisible as far as like in society. And it's basically showing how like black men are considered invisible in society. And it was just like a very quirky book, but it is really good. So that's what I would start with. Another thing that I did, every day I would listen to a black figure. So I would listen to Malcolm X, or all the people I named. Every day I would go on YouTube, and 20 minutes out your day, listen to them. So that helped me. Like every day I'm going to listen to Malcolm X. I'm going to listen to Khalid Muhammad. I'm going to listen to Angela Davis. I'm going to listen to random facts. Like I watched this one about how they did studies on like black kids and white kids and certain things and all of that stuff, because all of that is going to entice you to be like, man, this is all just so interesting. Like,
Right.
So yeah, that's where I would start. It's like YouTube. Reading that book, and then maybe reading the new Jim Crow laws, because that'll show you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Brianna, and thank you so much for joining us today. Tomorrow, Sean and James, I believe, will be here. And once again, thank you for joining us on PushTalk, and until next time, be safe.